So we are live with tonight's stream. This list, once again, MTG Josh, great source for Brawlz deck lists. This list is very similar to Toxrill lists and to a certain extent a Gyruda. It's basically a Dimir, either mid-range or control deck, using Sephiroth to keep smaller creatures at bay. You have some blink effects to take advantage of this. You also have some other creature effects that have some blink things. So things like Shouldered and such, Massacre Worm, basically things that can kind of recycle ETB effects. And then you have, blue-black control stuff. You have Thought Seizes, you have Duresses, you have Dreams of Steel and Oil, you have Counterspell and Mana Drain, a bunch of good black removal. And then some good black Dimir mid-range threats, things like a Born Oculus, Cure the Rising Tide. You have card advantage like Black Market Connections, Phyrexian Arena, Jace the Mind Sculptor. So basically, if you've seen a Toxrill or a Gyruda deck, it's very similar to what that deck's trying to achieve. And then just winning, whether you're using things like Panharmonicon, Virtue of Knowledge. You're just trying to really kind of take over the board with these ones. We only played really one match with this, but I mean, the deck isn't too dissimilar to what we played with Gyruda a couple weeks ago. Except we don't have all the combo orientated clone effects in the deck. Instead, you're more akin to playing, just trying to, somewhere between Gyruda and Toxrill, basically. If you have any experience with either deck. So, one change from Edge of Eternities now is legendary I want to say vehicles and spaceships can now be commanders. So, for instance, our opponent you're seeing in Spirit Flagship Vessel. Sand seems pretty reasonable, so we'll definitely try it out. See if our opponent plays a fetch land in one, whether they crack it or not. Stifle is a bit of a cutesy card. It's certainly a card that you can potentially get if your opponent's playing fetch lands. Land destruction unlocked. And our opponent conceded to a turn 1 or turn 2 Stifle. So apparently they really needed that to fix their mana. Don't know how many more quick wins we'll get with this deck tonight, but nice to pick up a decent one there. Up against Infinite Guideline Station. So apparently a bunch of space stations tonight from Edge of Eternity. This is the 5-color one. I think we'll mulligan this one. This hand's a little bit better. Stifle our opponent to I'm beginning to see why Stifle's in this deck. May not be a great draw, but it caused 2 real quick concessions to our opponents needing fixed mana, so proliferate. Sure. This hand seems fine. We just pass. It's a beautiful command tower. Play around their opponent. Unfortunately, we don't have the stifle this time around, but here's what it is. Alright, so put this out on black, I suppose. Play that out. Comes a 4/4. Sure. Does our opponent run counter spells? I guess we'll find out in a minute. Curious what they sack here. I assume they figure you'd sack your commander here. And I love my wife, but she has decided to hum a song that I have been trying to get out of my head all weekend. I can draw the card. So, yeah, thanks. Move 3 counters. Let that hit the battlefield. Well, helps if I read the darn card. But I think we're going to go ahead and concede here. So I was thinking, and I should have checked more closely, I'm used to these style effects whenever it's bounced or leaves the battlefield, returning the creature or permanent to the battlefield. So that was my mistake for not reading the card there. So always make sure you're reading cards, especially with the new set. Adding a whole bunch of weirdly designed space stations and such to what people are playing, so. Liana of the Dark Swirl. Squirrel. Definitely keeping this one. It's the mono black control deck. We'll lead on Thoughtseize. Opponent's mulliganing a lot, so I wonder. Celestius, Duress. Which one of these do I care about? Duress is annoying. Let me take the Celestis. Like at best, our opponent probably gets the Arcane Signet here. Which, while certainly Celeste down isn't the end of the world. Like if we had a Black Market Connections or a Phyrexian Arena or something like that in our hand, it would have been much more don't mind hitting a land drop here. Like if we had something worth defending, it would have been much more interesting to me, but I just don't think let's do all of it. We'll fetch this. The only card I could draw here, Duress isn't. Do I even care about Duress here? Not really. Of oil and steel. This is command a certain card. Assume we have an answer to a Planeswalker somewhere in our deck. Alright. Apparently our opponent just decided they couldn't beat Narset, so guess it was good that we chose to take Narset. Down to business, as my wife got the Milan song stuck in my head. Ashki, Teamer's Roar. I think we could do a little bit better mana-wise in that hand. This hand is a little bit clunky, but I think we'll try it. Hopefully finding a second black source, either off this Knight's Whisper or off the Surveil. Basic Island, just ain't gonna cut it here. Okay, there's the second swamp. Currently 5 cards in hand, so we won't discard. Sure. Of course, counter draw a card, then discard a card. If you have 4 more, you may cast discard card without paying its mana cost. Ballon T-Rex. Okay. Cut it down. Go ahead and play Jose. Back. Alright. Let's get down to business to defeat the Huns. Alright, put that back and that back for now. Play that out. Play that out. Sure. Scan, put that in. That on top of our deck, I guess. Yep. And our opponents decide they've gotten behind far enough. This deck is pretty efficient at what it does. Now, those first two ones were kind of flukes because we had Stifle in our hand and our opponent had a fetch land, and they just decided that they couldn't couldn't or didn't wish to continue playing the game. Vivi, gold it. Does hand do much against a Vivi opponent? Try it. Mox. Okay. Dreams of oil and steel. Put a swamp out. Just assume we're going to bounce something with Brazen Burrower here. Turn on the stack. Let's go ahead and bounce that. Mill, get rid of a bunch of stuff in your graveyard. Just pass. We could obviously play Panharmonicon here, but I think I'm much more interested in trying to pressure the Ral. ton of damage from this nonsense. Feel like we're gonna get dumpstered this game. Have another instant, we're basically dead anyway, so. Of course they do. Alright. We're gonna get run over by the VV. Sometimes if you can't stop the one or two rounds of VV, you just die, because once they start going off, it just gets kind of nuts. Kind of like how we did last week with some of the stream. VV is just a dumb card once it gets rolling, so. Rowan, Scion of War. Only as a sorcery. Missing blue mana, but we'll try it, I guess. See, do they play out the Rowan? They're going with the blue. Sure. Dark Ritual. Wallz Citadel. Discarding that and running Throne. Mm-hmm. Yep, so you have a 1/1. It's fine. Okay. Sure. Okay, put that and that on top. Okay. Discard an island. And your opponent concedes. Unless you control an island or swamp. Alrighty. Ignis Essentia. Whoever looks at the top 6 cards of your library, you may put a land among them on the battlefield, the rest in your library in a random order. Exile target card from your graveyard. If a creature was exiled this way, create a food token. Yeah, this hand seems, we have 3 lands, a mana drain, Power Stone, River's Rebuke, and Shouldered, so overall seems pretty reasonable. Play that out. out so we can have mana drain up on 2. Sure. Up goes Brainstorm. I highly doubt we'll use mana drain this turn, but you never know. Can't think of too many things I'd want to counter here, but it's certainly a possibility. It's a decent enough card, but we'll just go ahead and play Power Stone out. Pass turn. Likely we'll get a land out of this. Yeah. This opponent either has Pact of Negation or Subtlety in hand. Those are the only 2 cards I think at this point that would trigger a reaction here. Pact of Negation, obviously, they'd die immediately. Subtlety might be worth it. Though, to be fair, they could just recast Ignatius here. Or Ignis. Okay, one does Time Warp. Primeval Titan. Goes and allows them to go and search 2 lands. They go and grab Mystic Sanctuary and that. Go ahead and deal with this Prime Time. I have a feeling we're going to fall behind because they're a ramp deck, but I'll go cast Instant Sorcery, Sultai, so you can play lands from your graveyard. Okay. Alright. I mean, our opponent's got to be very unlucky to miss with loot, so. Especially since, once again, they're likely holding on to Pact of Negation here. 3 steps ahead. Don't know that I would have countered that, but I mean, sure. Two, three, four, five, six. So we can't do everything. I assume this is going to eat a Pact of Negation. Flare of Denial. Guess that is another card that could have been in their hand, but once again, another free counter spell, so. Looks like it'll be Damnation and hope whatever they flip off of loot isn't too broken. Ah. Sure. That's this for 8. Damnation. Looks like they use a lot of clone effects in addition to Big Dumb Idiots. Alright. Tapped. 6, 7. So do we play Virtue of Persistence or do we play Bolas' Citadel? Opponent conceded. That's interesting. So I mean they did flood out and they did use both their Seek abilities, but that does feel like a slightly premature concession. They just didn't feel like it beat us in a longer game, but don't think that game was over yet, but I do think we were in a, depending on what was in their hand, a slightly advantageous position. So Exile target creature. Interesting card. Against a... When the creature you control dies, draw a card if it was attacking. Otherwise, Garnet deals 1 damage to each opponent. Sure. Play that one out. Is there any reason to play that one out this turn? No, just go Temple Deceit. Definitely don't need another land right now. This one's just annoying enough. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of it. What am I looking for here? All right. So unfortunately, there is no Meathook Massacre in our deck. So I guess we go with Massacre Worm. Beep, beep, beep. Professional Facebreaker, sure. Three, four, five, six. Opponent draws a card. Interesting choice for our opponent. Okay, deal with that. Okay, interact pack tremors goes goodbye. Pretty sure we're about dead here. Reanimate just isn't really an option right now. I can put us to 3. Again, put us to 1. Okay. And we die. We die because our opponent can make a fish, sack it, and then go from there. So we just took too much of the incidental ping damage our opponent was doing. Aristocrat style decks can be tricky for control decks sometimes. So. Squall, Seed Mercenary. He is seems fine. Probably should put Command Tower as our first land. Thoughtseize. Shocker. So if they took Kiora, which is Mystic Study, go. This for 2, I'm fine with that. Bounce that. When Sephi comes in, it'll deal double the problem. I assume this is human, yeah. Okay. Problem is this doesn't work with sagas, I don't believe, so presume they're gonna name Sephiroth, yeah. Okay. We're playing this weird game of duck, 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 deuce. Sure. Could play Sephiroth, but really not going to do us a whole lot of good right now. So I get Adeline back. Unfortunately, going to force us to cast Sephiroth. Can only assume Sephiroth's going to die here, but yeah, we need something pretty good here. I don't even know what could get us back into that game right now. Sun Titan allows the opponent to go and get anything converted mana cost through a list from their graveyard whenever it enters their attacks. So when they get Curse of Silence or Adeline or anything like that, they're in pretty good shape. I guess technically this turn the best card we could hit would be definitely not that. Dark Ritual being awkward here. I think we're just going to fall too far behind, so we'll go ahead and call it a game. I mean, the only source of card advantage we saw was Rhystic Study. Our opponent played around Rhystic Study. They got Underworld Connections online and just kind of ran us over. So, it happens. It's a very mid deck. I mean, if you enjoy the control style deck, this deck is fine. You know, I still continue to wonder why these decks all don't run something like the One Ring. I mean, if you're going to be playing cards like Phyrexian Arena and Black Market Connections, you may as well play the card that actually, you know, does the most card draw. But as far as what the deck does, it's perfectly fine. You know, it can be outground by mid-range decks using similar tools like Phyrexian Arena and stuff. It can be overpowered by the Spellslinger decks. Generally, it's pretty good against the aggro and tribal decks. And then combo, it just kind of depends on which side of the coin you see. If you see, and that's one of the things with control decks, right? Is you're generally balanced, but it's do your answers line up with your opponent's threats? If they do, and you can draw your card advantage at the right time, you can have a pretty decent to reasonable game. If they don't, you can kind of get into this weird situation where if your opponent has one threat you can't answer, you're in trouble, or if you get into the point where your opponent just snowballs, especially in the non-white versions of control decks that don't have cards like Farewell, you can sometimes struggle. I mean, certainly you have cards like River's Rebuke, you could play something like Cyclonic Rift, but overall, I mean, once Dimir gets really behind on the board, without something like River's Rebuke or Cyclonic Rift, you run into a lot of problems if it isn't specifically creatures. Because, I mean, it can answer, obviously, things like Toxic Deluge and Damnation can answer most things. Invoke Despair gives you a little bit more outs. You have some other unique effects like Shouldered. So I think creatures you're pretty reasonably well set up against, but like anything else that sticks, especially artifacts, enchantments, planeswalkers, those can be a little bit trickier. And then, opponents that don't necessarily care about you killing all their stuff, like the aristocrat style decks where your opponent, every time a creature's entering or leaving or dying, they're pinging you, or things like impact trimmers and such. We lost cards like impact trimmers and Ral pinging us and those kind of things. You have to have your very specific answers at the right time, or you're just going to die to those things, and you can't always guarantee that you're going to have that. So Sephiroth, not the most impressive. This is not the most impressive of the 3 Sephiroths we've played. I think there's a 4th. There's a Boros Sephiroth that could be played. I still think either the Mono Black or the Atraxa ones are a lot more fun. This one, it's fine, but I think if you want to play this style of thing, Toxrill is just a little bit better. But, if you just want to play a sweet Sephiroth, and this is probably like the best art Sephiroth, I think. It's fine. It's not the most powerful commander. It's kind of expensive for what it does, and even in comparison to things like Toxrill and Gyruda. The rest of the shell, you could change some things up, Confounding Conundrum. MTG Josh obviously went with, like things like Stifle and Confounding Conundrum to kind of disrupt, fetch land mana bases and stuff. You could easily run things like Cyclonic Rift. Brawlz Expertise, I've never been extremely big fan of this card. It can be fine at bouncing things back, potentially casting like a Panharmonicon or something. Didn't really get a chance to do the Aetherflux Reservoir, Bolus Citadel thing. Is one way to gain life in this deck. Feels like you probably want like 1 or 2 others. But it's fine for what this deck is doing. And then obviously you have Onyx, which can gain you some life. This deck was fine. Hopefully next week we'll get into the actual Edge of Eternity stuff finally. But as always, I want to thank everybody for hanging out, my lovely wife, anybody else that might have been watching the stream. And as always, don't catch our streams every Sunday evening. And I will see you next week.